Dear friends, greetings everyone watching us online, and good evening to everybody who is attending us at Ukraine Media Center. It's our first event happening within the ceremony of awarding the ceremony of awards of Gongadze. I'm happy we have started this story this year. So right away, I'm not going to take you a lot of time, and I will announce when the ceremony can be watched. The day after tomorrow, on the 21st of May, you switch to Suspilne Culture, or you switch to the page of Gongadze Prize online, and there will be online broadcast of the main event, where we will find out the name of the laureate. That's what we're going to find out the day after tomorrow. And today, I'm happy to announce the meeting event, the perspective event, so we could better, from different perspectives, get familiarized with our nominees. And let me introduce the trinity of those on the shortlist. So please meet editor-in-chief and co-founder of the Kyiv Independent, Olha Rudenko. Pleasure seeing you. Investigative journalist and head of Ukrainska Pravda Investigative Department, Mykhailo Tkach. And war correspondent, photographer for Reuters, Liubysh-Kirdei. Ivan, pleasure seeing you. So today's activity will be broadcasted by Larysa Denysenko, human rights advocate and writer. Larysa, thank you for working hand in hand with Gongadze Prize. And the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Vlad. I appreciate the introduction and the beginning of the new public season of the prize. You know, dear colleagues, I would like to start with the first block of questions to you, and then I hope the audience will use this opportunity to ask questions from you. So we'll be getting back to you, to the floor, and back to you again. So we're going to work for 1 hour. You know, we had a nice duo with Georgi Gongadze. I was a lawyer back then. I was a part of the blog Ahead Ukraine, and he was the head of the press center of that political fraction, and he was always rushing ahead. I was trying to stop him through different regulations, and basically using these push and pull principles, we were working together. But you know, during such a long period, you can study a person. For him, it was important to know the truth and to tell the truth. For him, it was important to decommunize. He hated communism. We didn't even had this thing back then. We didn't have this phenomena, decommunization, and he knew what is the threat of Russian Federation, both for Ukraine and for Georgia. For him, what was important was the fair choice. That's why he supported the opposition forces, the forces opposing to Kuchmism. That was not about the communists, but about other political parties, such as Ahead Ukraine, Вперед Ukraina, or others. And for him, what was important was the national identity. He was really respecting Ukrainian nation, Georgian nation, the nations that he loved. And the war, he was thinking that war is his when he was in offensive against unfairness and injustice. So my question to you is, what's truth to you? What are the basic settings for you? What's important for you in your life, in your profession? Anyone can start. So Mykhailo is starting. Good afternoon all. Pleasure seeing all of you. You know, to me, it seems that in a broad sense, all that list of priorities, well, nothing changed in it. Talking about Ukrainian identity, Russia, the war, the elections, and so on. the same priorities, the same fight, because of those fundamental key criteria, even after years, they don't just emerge from nowhere, they don't circulate. And in fact, in this context, journalism remains a fundamental and basic. I kept reiterating it again and again that after imposition of the martial law in Ukraine, the only institution capable of fulfilling its function despite all the regulatory restrictions or subjective restrictions. And we understand that so far the journalists don't have a full access to the government bloc, to ministers, to deputies. I don't remember when I could see someone of the ministers face to face, probably somewhere in the dining facility, but so that you could ask about the strategy, tactics, the development, recovery of Ukraine, and given this important period in the history of Ukraine, when we don't have a lot of time and there is a lot of tasks that the state is supposed to solve and fails to solve so far. I mean, keeps failing for years. There could be different explanations, objective, subjective, but to me it seems that until this day, the people who end up in the government don't realize the importance of the journalists' work. They never think. They demonstrate. Well, it's clear that different politicians do it differently, but mostly they demonstrate disrespect and they don't realize, and I think it's fundamental, the importance of the work of the journalists, including for their activities, because it's obvious that after the beginning of the full-scale invasion and imposition of the martial law, the control over the government, over the politicians, government officials, it's at the minimum level, and within the first month of the full-scale invasion, it could be understood because the circumstances were like that. We had to just carry on, but now, I mean, it's less understood. Sometimes we become the authors or the witnesses of the materials about the abuse of power when we don't have answer to the question whether our state is going to exist within 1 year and whether after 1 year the next nominees of Gongadze Prize will be sitting here or in a different space. So, in my opinion, unfortunately, not much has changed. The fight is still on. The priorities are the same. The fight goes on for profession, for the right to speak. And recently, the Gongadze Prize, they were interviewing me and they asked me a question about the threats, pressure, and I have given one example, if I may. Like 1 year ago, after one of the materials, I first got a message, and then someone unknown, probably one of the protagonists of the previous materials, made a distro to the emails of me and my colleagues. He was saying, like, I already said it to Tkach, sometimes the ability to shut your mouth in a timely manner saves lives. And obviously there are no official results of the investigation, just like in many other cases. 13 cases where I'm a victim as a part of the process, but sometimes I'm getting to this message to that distro, and during this interview I've realized it. For me, something that may be obvious for a lot of people, that now, during this fight, during such a war, such a struggle, with all the full realization of the fact that we don't have only external but internal enemy as well, it's a huge challenge for the journalists, because speaking openly is not easy. You can always experience some pressure, and not always even the society understands. And we remember Ukrainska Pravda starting to criticize certain activities of the people in power after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and someone was saying it's not timely, but I think that during the full-scale invasion, the ability to open your mouth in a timely manner saves lives, and I think that investigative department of Ukrainska Pravda demonstrated it for a number of times, disclosing some serious abuses of serious level officials who were supposed to be taking care of the country during such a challenging period. Meanwhile, they were enriching themselves or doing some other indecent things during this period. I mean, when all of the Ukrainians experienced the war. That's in short. Thank you, Mykhailo. I think that there are Georgi's priorities, and they are out of time. We are still standing in the capsule, you know. Sometimes it may subside, sometimes the intensity may grow, but they keep circulating. The only thing I disagree with you about is, and let me explain why, I'm just feeling very sensitive meaning to the word, and I really call the enemy an external enemy, and talking about our internal things when it doesn't come to colors for fire or some internal enemies, traitors, then I think that it's just some internal pests, you know. But let's not forget our really large-scale enemy is Russian Federation, which is currently in offensive. Our territories are occupied, the tortures are going on, other war crimes are happening, and I mean that fact that we try to bring an external and internal enemy to the same level, we're just doing the wrong thing by that. Well, to me, it seems that if we see that after all those efforts, the security and defense forces continue to deter the enemy for a fourth year, but maybe for even 18th year. And if this, you know, the offensive stops and we just don't criticize, don't disclose the activities of Ukrainian officials, they using this task that the Russian Federation says for themselves, they can do it for them. They may just disarm us, and those things that are happening, and let me repeat myself, in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, it seemed to me that the things cannot be happening the way they were happening before. Like everybody had understood that such a threat brought everybody to a different condition, and with every new year of this full-scale invasion, I realized that if there is no control, if there is no demand on part of the society, on law enforcement, other institutions, to demand them to do their job, to control them, to prevent them from stealing, embezzling, and weakening our state, I don't know how all of it is going to end. You know, this anti-system is capable of a lot of things. With all due respect to what you're saying, well, they can, yes, they are capable, and I think that this is why your work is important. Ivan, Olga, yeah, I'm sorry we're playing too much with Mykhailo, in a plain dialogue with Mykhailo, but again, getting back to the question of fundamental values. Well, then you're not going to like it because I have a response to what you were saying. Okay, let's exchange our statements. Well, getting back to values, I was thinking about it as Mykhailo was answering. You know, I really loved your wording, like don't call both sides the enemies, like don't call internal enemy the enemy. I mean the corruption that undermines us from inside. I think I really can't agree with it. I like the statement, but I still can't agree with it. Even despite the different nature of the enemy, the enemy that is sitting inside, pretending to be on our side, it undermines us. It eats us from the inside. I think that this enemy is even more cynical and more cowardly. So I wouldn't hold myself back and not call those people enemies. That's my short statement. So Olga put the internal enemy back on the table. It's still there. Well, I think that in this company during this discussion is quite relevant. Well, talking about the values, I may have a banal answer, maybe a little bit of a more personal nature. Mykhailo made a broad statement about the values, and I have a more of a personal story. I got this realization just probably a couple of years ago. Just like all of us, I had a journey, a personal journey of understanding the world and myself, and to me it turned out that I value justice, and the mission of journalism is very close to it. But after certain introspective work, conversations with therapists and with clever people, I've realized quite unexpectedly for myself that it's of great value to me, really. And there is certain foundation for this. Well, everything happens back in your childhood, as we all know. And I've also thought, like, may I beg your pardon? I'm just back from the United States, and sometimes I can just freeze because of the jet lag. So for me, journalism is the individual, the balance of individual and collective. And under collective, I understand not only work in the office that can be sometimes fun and dynamic, but the journalist is a representative of the people. So I usually feel it a lot, and my biggest frustration is when I see some reputed individual disrespecting a journalist. My frustration is that this reputed individual doesn't see thousands or millions of people behind the journalists who were voting that person in, and I think a lot about such individuals. Thank you, Olga. Ivan, the floor is yours. I really apologize. I got all of my friends tired with this phrase, but nevertheless, unfortunately, after what happened to me, you may know, after the rocket, I have problems with the memory, and I forgot all of my past, so I cannot really handle some of the facts just in the way my friends do, like Mykhailo and Olga does. And I cannot really answer very good to this question, but my physiotherapist says that the memory is going to come back and I will recall everything. And as Taras Grigorovich Shevchenko was saying, there's no time for sorrow. Everything's going to be all right. And soon we're coming back and we will talk properly. So, in answer to your question about the values, look, what I would like to tell you. When I was staying in the hospital, unfortunately, I told you I had problems with the memory, but right by my side there were medics working, and I had veterans around me, and I wanted to make a footage of them. I asked, bring me a camera, and you see, I cannot hold the camera with my right hand. However, no one can prohibit me to make a footage with my phone. So I was making a video of them. I was recording them for the history. So for me, journalism on some internal level, I mean, is to demonstrate what's going on. and I was trying to do it like this. Today I'm making a video, and by evening I could have made a story for the doctors. And it was somewhere in my heart that the information about what's going on should be provided in a timely manner, and the more precise the better, and it should be as faithful as possible, just the way you see it, without adding anything. So to me, the value is to give the truthful information in a quality manner the soonest possible. And for me, as a cameraman, because I'm a cameraman, it's important to have this technical component, edit, addition, and the people, as they watch the materials from the TV screens or the screens of their notebooks or the phones, they are becoming witnesses of what's going on. Not like I'm a witness and that's it, that they are supposed to have a feeling that they are present there in that moment. So to me, as a cameraman, this is what's important. Ivan, but based on your experience, haven't you thought probably to make a documentary about rehabilitation, about the process that you're undergoing, the way you're seeing the veterans undergo it, the way the medics, the doctors, the rehabilitologists work? I mean, this rehabilitology, I'm currently undergoing rehabilitation with my mother, so to what extent is it an intimate process, a person that learns to walk, a person that learns to remember things, and a person who helps them to do it? It's like an intimate dance of life. Haven't you thought that then, or even now, you can start making this story out of it? Well, honestly, answering to your question, I will tell you even more. I am lucky. I have a wonderful wife, Maria Semenchenko, who is also a journalist. So it's her who is always my guide. And she tipped this idea to me. She pitched it just the same that you've said. She said, make as much videos as possible, and then probably, well, not probably, but definitely something's gotta give. Well, and this is what I'm trying to do. I cannot hold a big camera. The biggest thing I can hold is a small camera, but again, I have a phone and I use it. And then with my beautiful wife Maria and journalist Natalka Nagorna, we're going to sit and make some media product out of it. So this is the teamwork of the people who trust each other. Maria, greetings. Thank you very much for your help. Yeah, my wife stimulates me to do it and keeps supporting me. Dear colleagues, as I've promised you, if you have any questions to Olga, Mykhailo, or Ivan, you can do it. Technically, you can help us with the microphone. Whoever has a desire, the microphone is waiting for you. Not yet. Oh, there seems to be a question. Good evening. I have a question, a broad one. Vladimir Aronets asked it on Facebook, and I keep thinking about it for each of you. What is journalist ethics, and to what extent there should be a human in a journalist, and journalist in a human being? So who is ready to answer? Well, to me, there's such a statement that the journalist is supposed to stay a human. Well, I don't think in such categories. It's not like opposing things, journalist and a human being. Talking about ethics, well, sometimes I interfere some discussions in Facebook, and I think that we're living in interesting times when we are rethinking things, but we play with it a lot. By rethinking, we ask from the journalists, like, let's put like this balance between your interests, like your personal interests or putting your interests over the interests of the society. We don't always find that balance in the right place. That's my impression of the public discussion. I'm talking, for example, about this discussion a couple of weeks ago about the camera people who make pictures of the victims of the rocket and drone strikes. When it comes to ethics, to me, it's important to make sure that this ethics should be clear for everyone. Even if it's not set forth as a policy, there should be some fundamentals that everyone in this group of people understand. I mean, your small team in your office, just because you agreed to do so. I think that it's important to avoid miscommunication or flexibility of the rules when someone can do things in one way, or like so someone is prohibited to do something and the others are not. And I think it's good when there is transparency, when we communicate those rules to the readers in writing or otherwise, so that our audience, I mean the audience of a journalist or some specific editorial, have understanding of the rules the journalists are guided in their work, not in details. I mean, the readers don't have to understand whether we read the quotes or proofread the quotes or something like this, but I mean, when it comes to fundamental things. Mykhailo, Ivan, well, very frequently in our work, I think it's mostly related to ethics, because the protagonist of our materials, and you might have probably seen recently that we found Mr. Komornitsky abroad. He was on the wanted list and so forth. And now this person is in Austria sending letters. His lawyers already sent letters to our office proving that it's interference in the personal life of a person who fled, abusing the power, using the support of the law enforcement. Well, we didn't want to interfere personal life of a person who fled Ukraine and is on the wanted list and lives his best life in Austria. You know, you wouldn't have violated with this phrase, nothing, I mean, out of what they require from you. Well, it's a different story. In every single case, you know, the lawyers who try to do their job to make an advertisement to help other refugees, let's call it like this, or rather fugitives. I mean, the people who live here in Ukraine, who do the business, so to say, without any rules. And we've heard the tapes from Komornitsky office, the ones published by National Anti-Corruption Bureau, ending up in such a country as Austria, they start to appeal to the law, applicable over there, trying to protect themselves with it. And here, from all what we know in their communication with anti-corruption agency or say special anti-corruption prosecutor's office, they had no restrictions of ethical manner or otherwise. But I mean, they use this system here to create, not for all of the residents of this country, of this city, good life conditions, but to flee, to leave, and then use some preference conditions of those countries, destroying constitution, destroying the law here, then to take advantage of the system existing there. And in my opinion, it's such an incredible paradox. And time and time again, those people appeal to the same issues. For example, recently we had material, the story of a celebration about the top-level SBU, Security Service of Ukraine officers, and that birthday party was attended also by the high-profile criminals. Those who are supposed to fight the crime, they were sitting at the same table, celebrating the same thing, and there was a moment when that event was attended by high-profile criminal Umka. Sergei Olha, his nickname is Umka, quite an influential criminal figure. So I was filming Umka walking out, and before that there was a family of this Sergei Olha, Umka, his wife, his daughters, a son, and to me, I've made a decision that there's no public interest to the family of Umka, so we've only shown him, Sergei Olha, and after that, certain sources reported to me that no matter what happens with those with that person, I mean, he was apprehended, but he really appreciated that it was professional, and there is this limit in our profession. We don't overstep it, but the protagonists of our materials who have no restrictions or some fundamental restrictions such as criminal code, very frequently they abuse it, appealing, like writing some statements, some reports, and Komornitsky is just one example of it. And to me, I'm a journalist. I mean, for Ukrainian society, it wouldn't be interesting where is Komornitsky, where does he reside? Shouldn't he have done what he had done? And should have the anti-corruption bodies then do this? And then he, using the help of other law enforcement authorities, wouldn't have fled abroad. Well, to me, it wouldn't have been interesting. I've only seen him for the first time when we found him in Vienna. And there were photos online dating 10 years ago, but unfortunately, those people abuse it a lot. Answering your question, we treat it in a responsible manner, and sometimes even more responsible than the situation requires from us, because those people want usually to use your faithfulness to disrupt you, destabilize you, to press on you. You know, we are living in this process permanently. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Ivan, do you have anything to add? Well, first of all, I would like my colleagues for their answers. I would like to answer this question from the cameraman perspective. We were discussing it with my wife. We were discussing the matter of journalist ethics, the cameraman ethics. You know, recently there was a shelling of Kyiv, and there were casualties, and unfortunately, my colleagues were taking a large plane of the casualties and shown those pictures. And I, you know, in this sense, I always try, you know, now that I've videotaped the people with amputations in my rehabilitation center, I'm asking myself a question. Man, would you like yourself to be videotaped like this? Or your family, for example? Like Mykhailo is saying, I don't really care about Komornitsky, the hotel he's living at, but I'm curious about what kind of person he is, what has he done. So I think this is what the journalist ethics is about. And to me, like a cameraman, not to demonstrate some mutilated faces or bodies or terrible funerals, something about the tragedy of a person. You know, this tragedy may be demonstrated in a different ways. And I'm telling you this as a cameraman. There's a lot of perspectives, a lot of examples. and you can match both the videos and the words that you feel the hurt, but not because you see a person bleeding or something like this. Yeah, exactly. And this is what the cameraman ethics, journalist ethics is about, in my opinion, specifically when it comes to the war, the demonstration of the tragedy of the people who were killed. You can show this strategy without violating journalist ethics. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you very much for your question. I maybe bring the microphone here. Another question. Good afternoon. My name is Anastasia. I'm the student of the first year of the Institute of Journalism named after Taras Shevchenko, and I'm walking this way. Why am I here, and what do I want to tell the society? So my question is, when have you realized that you want to do journalism, that you want to tell the truth to the people? What was the breaking point in your lives? So who is going to start? Olga? Don't deprive the people of funny answers. Well, in my case, unfortunately, I didn't have any breaking point when I could have seen some global injustice, and I've realized that as a journalist I may solve this problem, and I decided to study to become a journalist. I ended up on this path almost randomly. As I was graduating from the school, I decided to enter a journalist faculty, and by then I haven't seen any single journalist alive, and I didn't really consume any media product, any news. To me, I had an impression that journalism is like when you read something and the people read what you write, and like you don't even have to communicate with those people. I didn't really make sure, because when it turned out that you have to talk a lot to the people, it became very surprising to me. And another thing that convinced me, I didn't really want to learn any more mathematics in my life. And it's nothing inspirational. It's not even worth of these 2 minutes of my speech. Well, this is what brought me to this path. But then, before that breaking point, I mean, the closest event that happened to this breaking point is when, during my study, I started working in a local newspaper in the city of Dnipro. It was a weekly newspaper with a TV program printed in the newspaper. I don't know if a lot of those present here remember what is TV program printed in the newspaper. So we had 3 journalists, and all of our texts were either coming to us or calling us. By the way, the address of the office was never published anywhere, but somehow people knew where we are located, and sometimes the people were coming to us. For example, there was a woman coming and saying, like, look, in our apartment block, they don't repair the pipes. They haven't been repairing them for 20 years. And the head of this utility company is corrupted. And we were writing an article about this, and they started getting their pipes repaired. So on a local level, to me, it was an acquaintance with the phenomena that we now call impact, the impact of journalists, and it started inspiring me when I've realized that you can do something and it could cause changes. And I usually recall with warmth those years of work in the local press. Thank you, Olga. Ivan, Mykhailo. Well, when it comes to mathematics, it was a similar story. Not only mathematics, but physics as well. In the 11th grade, the teachers, they kind of crossed me out. They say, oh, Mykhailo is going to be a journalist, so we can not ask him any questions. So I had no problems in those classes for the last 2 years. But when it comes to journalism, I think that an important function of the journalism why is it so important in our country? Because unfortunately, due to a number of different circumstances and reasons, we really don't have, or we have it, but only on paper, such things as institutions, establishments, and so on. Should they fulfill their function in a proper way, serve within their authority to the citizens they are supposed to serve to? I think that demand for what Olga is saying and what people report to us, it would be way less. But since people really very frequently experience some hell in a direct sense of those words because their living conditions are not proper or compliance with the law. For the first time when I ended up in the first process, when there was the first case of prevention to the journalists, I couldn't imagine all that stuff is happening like this. I was thinking like, I'm a journalist and I have to prove in a case about attack on me, given the fact that it was videotaped, it was documented that I violated no laws. What happens to regular people who just try to seek some justice? And you were said about the justice, and Georgi and Olga was saying that justice is such a fundamental thing, and I think that an incredible number of people in our country really aspires for justice in some local level, broad level. But unfortunately, those who are supposed to ensure it either deal with something else or use their offices for some other purposes. And this is where we face this issue when in journalism, in newspapers, in TV channels, in YouTube, and so on, the people are trying to seek this justice. Again, let me repeat what I was saying in the beginning during the full-scale invasion, when really the people entered this process of restrictions, and very frequently when I'm being approached on the street, they ask me, what can we do? You know, people in those matters of compliance with the law, they see their forcelessness, and they don't see any support in public officials, in all those public institutions. You know, it's such a huge layer. So when it comes to definition, back in my day, I was thinking that we all remember there was a lot of talks about this when Georgi was killed. I didn't realize what journalism is, what journalists deal with. I haven't seen any examples of work of journalists, but back then and even until this day, I was having a feeling that those people do something important due to their circumstances that I've mentioned. And unfortunately, the forces are very unequal in this sense, because the government machine and the number of people to whom, about whom we need to tell the society, there's a lot of such requests. I see it, but journalists, they don't come in large numbers. Even if they work 24/7, they wouldn't be able to fulfill that function that they are supposed to fulfill. Well, it's interesting because probably starting from 2017, there is All Ukrainian survey. What do Ukrainians know about the human rights? And there is a question, whom do you report to about violation of your rights? And basically every year, mass media are on the first place. That's basically what you, Mykhailo, are talking about. That's about people trying to give publicity, starting from the pipes that Olga was telling about, all the way up to corruption that people are facing. So, in fact, the people are relying on the media system rather than justice system, which I think is very wrong, which is misbalanced, so that the media system may reestablish their rights by rectifying this situation. Ivan, so when have you become inspired to become a journalist? Well, as I was telling you, I apologize for reiterating myself. I don't remember my past so far, but I admit why I decided to become a cameraman in journalism. Let me put a little bit of a white coat on myself, because if I trust to what my mom is said, who is a teacher of Ukrainian language and literature. She had a dispute with my teachers of physics and mathematics, because my teachers wanted me to become a mathematician, to continue studying mathematics and physics. So fortunately, I had a good knowledge of mathematics and physics in 11th grade. But why did I become a cameraman? So not if, but when you believe that story in my hard drive, I have a lot of pictures dating back 20 years ago. Pictures of my friends, my beautiful then girlfriend. Well, basically, I was making a lot of pictures back then, and I admit that if the God gave me such a talent, I have to present it not only to someone special, but I have to give it to the people, to the public. And I think that back then, 20 years ago, this is what became an inspiration for me to become a cameraman. Ivan really has wonderful, just fantastic pictures, landscapes, portraits. All of the works are cool, and Google search, it works, so you can Google him. There's a lot of inspiration, a lot of talent indeed. And I would like to ask you, that's probably going to be the last round of our conversation, or probably the audience may get involved, but I can't help but ask about Georgi and the topic of war, because he was saying that any event, any struggle, revolution, war, no matter who you are, a journalist, a person, you are supposed to find your place. So you are all journalists. You have your challenges. Mykhailo is dealing with the internal pests, internal enemy, internal problems, and not only them. Olga deals with the broad communication of who we are, what's going on here, war crimes, country advocacy in the broad sense. So Olga is stepping outside this war frame. Ivan is a war correspondent, has been a war correspondent since 2014. Any events unfolding in the front line starting from 2014, Ivan documented them. He has a lot to tell, but he already mentioned about his memory. But one way or another, now you're working with those who were in the front lines, who are rehabilitating. Again, it's about memorialization, it's about revitalization, reinvigoration. So why did you choose it? Why is it important during the war? If I may. So again, as I said, I don't remember the reasons why I've chosen this, why I'm doing this, but if you believe the stories from my friends, but again, that's between you and me. My friends were telling me that back in 2023, before it happened to me, again, the journalists have to be careful. I wanted to be a drone pilot. Even my wife, she knows we have a drone simulator, and I was training to pilot a drone because my friends keep telling me that I was believing that sooner or later I will have to join the armed forces of Ukraine, and I wanted, if I'm a cameraman, I think that there is a very direct connection here, right? On top of probably planning to be a part of press service of some brigade, I was also understanding, and now I understand that Kazakhs are the people who attacked our country, and me as a person, as a citizen, as a man, I have to take all possible efforts to destroy our enemy. Well, we still have this FPV controller at home, and I'm still training. I keep training to pilot it, and I think I really want, after my rehabilitation, I want this controller and the FPV to be rendered useless. I want Ukraine to win, but no one can guarantee it. Thank you, Ivan, Mykhailo, Olga. Well, what I was saying before about the reports as the full-scale invasion has begun, I've realized that a lot of military and civilians were reported to us, to Ukrainian Truth, Ukrainska Pravda, and there was a lot of requests. And probably within first half a year, I was starting to do my professional activities about 11, 12 in the night, and before that I was trying to respond the reports, the requests that were coming, and it was like everything. Evacuation from Mariupol. There was a country that needed to be registered in that region because there are people who can drive it, they live in that region, and you deal with it. Then the medicines for the children who were evacuated to Dnipro, and this type of medicines is missing, and you talk to the priest who is currently dealing with those medicines, and very quickly we got requalified having this platform, and people started asking us just about everything, and we were trying. I was thinking that if I'm working during this time in this office and people ask me, I have to respond to their needs first of all, and only then proceed to my professional activity. Talking about professional activity, those skills that we had about Ukrainian oligarchs assets, we started using them against Russian elites. We started publishing investigations about the yachts of Russian oligarchs. Some of them were detained. One was detained as it was leaving the dock. It was under repaired. It was repairing, and the repair was unfinished. And basically, I think it's a part of the justice. Those people who make money on supporting Kremlin, they have no right to use those benefits of that civilization against which they declare that war. And then in the middle of 2022, when we've realized and we started hearing from the sources that there are some shameful things going on inside Ukraine, to certain public officials understanding our responsibility for the society, we started working with those stories, working as volunteers, and in parallel working with Russian elites and assets. We've made a lot of materials after which the sanctions were imposed, European sanctions, Polish sanctions. We were making a footage in Poland when our border was blocked. So, sort of like this, for the time being, I think we've procured more than 300 vehicles. And as I've come up with the first fundraiser, there were many things happening not publicly. People were coming and saying, like, we have body armor or we have helmets, and you have that request from this. So there were chains built, and you were learning to tie those chains together. So as I started my first fundraiser, we were raising 1 million for the vehicles for the armed forces, because we were realizing there's a lot of need for these, in fact, expendables that are very important for fulfillment of any task like evacuation and a lot of others. So we've realized that for less than a day, we've raised that 1 million that we were trying to raise for 3 vehicles. And I've realized, and the audience realized, that now that we're dealing, we can do it quickly, and the military have realized it. And then we were doing it 24/7, and in parallel, we were also involved in our professional activities. Thank you, Mykhailo. Olga? Well, I always keep saying that I don't know what would I do if I wouldn't have had this job back in the day, and I keep reminding myself that it's about gratitude that we have this mission. We make that contribution, probably a small one, that cannot compare to the contribution of those who are our defenders. But still, it's a contribution to our victory, and I appreciate that we've started Kyiv independent 3 months before the full-scale invasion, and we try to use it in the best way possible. And there is no single day that I wouldn't have asked myself, are we doing enough? Can we do something better? And to me, it's like Ivan said, he wanted to be a drone pilot. And we keep asking ourselves, could we do something else, something different? And when I see so closely the work of the military or of the military medics, I have this feeling of depreciation of what I'm doing. We had such an episode. We've come up with a documentary in the end of the last year. It's called Can You Hear Me? It was made by Francis Farrell and our journalist Larysa Denysenko, and it's about rehabilitation and the work of the military medics. And I asked Elena as we were making the documentary, so she showed me some footage, and she said something of a kind, I'm watching this and I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing, because these people are doing an important job, and I'm saying, but you're going to show it to the world. It's important what you're doing. And then I've come to the premiere, and I got the same thought that I really had to convince myself that what I'm doing is important. And another aspect in response to your answer, I'm sorry for taking a little bit too much time, but within me it is united with this internal need not to stay aside during the struggle for something that's important to you. All of us, our generations, probably those who are younger, they don't feel it in the same way, but due to the circumstances, what our country was experiencing during the Soviet era, we were raised in this survival mode, and what was valued was not to cause, not to provoke, not to be conspicuous. Shouldn't anything bad happen? Our parents, they were fighting for survival, so they couldn't afford any fight for values. And the fact that now we can afford ourselves not to stay aside during this struggle for values. For me, this is what drives me. This is what I appreciate this profession for. That's a great note that we could finalize our discussion on. And but still, we promise the audience that we will provide them with an opportunity to ask their questions. And I think we have 10 more minutes. There were 2 hands, I guess. Thank you. Yelizaveta Kovalenko, Training Institute of Journalism. I have a question to Mr. Mykhailo, but I would also like to hear the opinion of other nominees. So in your opinion, the protagonists of your investigations, do they feel any responsibility in front of the Ukrainian people? Do they draw any conclusions after the response of the society to their activities, to what they do? Thank you. Let's take another question, and we will be able to understand can we answer it quickly or not. Sergei Chinarsky, I have a question to Olga and Mykhailo. For what I understand, you were studying in Dnipropetrovsk State University in journalism faculty. My question is, what would you wish to those who want to study journalism? And another question is to Mr. Mykhailo, for what I understand, I've heard that during the first year of the full-scale invasion, there was an agreement between investigative journalists and the government. I mean, I can only confirm what I've heard that was confirmed by USAID, that the internal investigations were proofread, and only after Nikolov sent that report about Ministry of Defense, and they never responded about the X, this is when a wave of internal investigations had started. Another question, I think, and was there another hand? If not, then, well, let's take just a small 5 minutes about the university. They're never gonna call me to have some address in front of their students. Well, I don't know what's the condition of the journalism faculty of this institute. If it looks like a faculty I started at, I don't advise anybody to study there because you're just going to waste your time. You can get a nice humanitarian education there within a first couple of years, but when it comes to professional things, it was a full profanation. Unfortunately, back then, I didn't realize it. And honestly, to me, it seems that journalism is not something you want to learn, but rather get some humanitarian education, a master's degree, and then start working as a journalist. And then about this agreement, I've never heard about it. That may be something specific for the projects that were funded by USAID, but I would be surprised to find out it was really true. But the investigations about corruption were also coming before Nikolov. There was about abuses. We had a panel with Natalka Stletska and Sekvil when in different editorials the first critical investigation came up after the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And if I'm not mistaken, the example of Ukrainska Pravda was about Denisova, the Commissioner for Human Rights, and it was 7 years earlier than Nikolov and the X. I just wanted to add some context. Well, that was a sensitive topic. Well, one by one. Then, talking about university, I had a complicated story. As I was entering, there was the last budget seat, and I was next, and then I was studying extracurricularly, and then I was transferred to a different faculty and stuff like that. I was just trying to get into that media, and starting from the third year of the university, I already started working in the profession. And what Olga was saying, I don't know the way it happens in other universities. I don't know any better. I was studying on the go, so to say. But the university was important to me because I ended up in an environment, a level up compared to where I was living in my city. I ended up in an environment where people were talking about the books. I mean, it made me catch up with them. And it's important, during your study to start practicing right away, because no matter what you study, if a person ends up one-on-one with what they need to do professionally, probably some knowledge from the university, it may come in handy. But again, I remember I was loath to talk to the people, and to me, calling somebody and asking a question, it was causing serious internal discomfort. But basically, this profession is what you learn by practice. I think universities should provide some general level of knowledge, but probably somewhere, probably in other universities, probably abroad, there are some more serious platforms where people can make footages during their study at the universities. And talking about USA, I think that's some puzzle. Definitely no agreements were made. I mean, it's difficult even to imagine to me someone making such agreements or trying to make such agreements. I think that the first investigation after the beginning of the full-scale invasion came up earlier than yours. And I think that about 6 or 7 figures that were described in my journalist investigations were already fired by then. In the context of US side, I'm not aware. All of the grant programs, they are about some amount of materials that you are obliged to issue, or your editorial. Any agreements, any wishes, they don't exist. That's something made up. So there were no agreements of that kind. There was information. As soon as such information was confirmed, we were publishing it in one way or another. This publication about Denysenko was important too. And the materials, well, I think it was either starting from August and then one by one, Office of the President, deputies corps of the ruling party, the governors, and you just name it, Deputy Prosecutor General who was fired. There's such a set of high-profile people that I don't know who could have agreed with whom. Talking about the protagonists, answering to a question, it's difficult to say whether they feel anything at all. Well, there are people who realize some things after the materials were issued. They say, yeah, we were not right. Like recently, there was a case of Alexander Slobozhenko. 1 year ago, we published that material. It had a lot of resonance. Those threads that I've told about, they were coming from that same person, or probably someone wanted to frame them. But recently, that person recorded a video statement in which he says that he obliges to pay 200 million of taxes, and he's apologizing. But before that, he made a film, like 1 hour of some accusations and insults against me. But after the year, I don't know, did he realize anything that we've articulated in our materials about those youth who buy the disabled status and demonstrate that rich life, I mean, using the helicopters to get from Courchevel to Nizza. I think that it was an important piece of it. I mean, I don't know if he realized it, but he still demonstrated it. Some may realize that they see themselves from outside, and others, they start threatening, start pressing, start attacking. The cases may be different with different people. I hope that many of those of the protagonists of my materials, they understand that there are rules, there are generally adopted rules. I apologize, we had this material about Boho. Many were saying that's not my level, but I think that, to me personally, during all those years, that's one of the most important materials, because all of the cafes, all of the restaurants were closing for nighttime, and some people who were agreeing with the law enforcement for not noticing their operation in the night, and it accumulated more and more abuses, because people have to buy passes to come to this boho to drive in the city in the night. That was a lot of corruption component, and after that material we were able to shut it down, and we keep checking, and we see that the law enforcement keep checking. So I had that feeling that both that cafeteria, that restaurant, and the people who were attending it, they haven't realized anything. I mean, the law enforcement, that they had 20 people coming into the club in the night, and they were trying to apprehend us for violating the martial law in the night. And so they were not noticing those 20 people, but noticing us. So, well, thank you. And to finalize it, I have a small question. I would like to ask you to be concise in your answers. It's not an easy question for Georgi. What was important, the realized national identity. How do you construe the Ukrainian identity for yourself and for the world now? Well, to me, it seems that it's important to draw a line between the fact that we are a victim of occupiers, the people who want to kill us, those who want to capture us, and us fighting, us struggling, us as a people. I'm just back from Pokrovsk. Yesterday I was staying in 2 brigades, talking to different people, listening to all those stories, that despite all those circumstances, lack of resources, what are the things those people do, There is a famous quote that nations that don't fight, they don't recuperate, and the nations who might have lost in their fight is evidence of a good chance of recuperation in a way that we all want to. So to me, it seems that it's important to realize that against us is this horrific military system of, I don't know how to call them. They cannot be called people, but all those things are right by our side. And after all these 3 years, I've met such an incredible number of strong, inspired people who live with that struggle, even despite all circumstances, even despite the fact that in the majority of cases is rather against than thanks to, and all those corrupted officials. People clearly see, even despite the abuses in the army, the people see that we have to be saved as a state, and they take incredible effort. And frequently staying in Kyiv, you feel like everybody's complaining, some circumstances, someone's missing cappuccino, people burn out, and you come to the front line, you talk to the people. And I come back to Kyiv, always as I come back to Kyiv from the front line, I come back in a different mood. It's important I understand that there is this discourse that exists now about the true ceasefire. It's an important part of a lot of expectations, but it's also important to continue to maintain this connection. People don't donate. People are not afraid. It seems to them that the war happens somewhere else, and the number of people who brought the disabled status who left. I mean, it's important to cover those topics too. But I think that our identity and it's evidenced by our story, and I think that our further history will evidence it as well, that we are fighters. And unfortunately, there's a lot of examples when some country, some agreements helped us, but in the majority of cases that we've studied, that we were reading about, a lot depends on ourselves. Thank you, Olga, Ivan. Me? Okay. Recently, we've come up with the first printed media, a one-off activity. I don't know if I really want to come up with another printed media again, but again, it's for external, for foreign audience. Well, there were those devices for simultaneous translation, so it's for foreign audience, and it was supposed to be a section of ourselves. What are we about? What is Ukraine about? And when we were trying to figure out the name, like the headline, we were coming back to this word resilience. And we really despise this word because in English language communication about Ukraine, it became a parasite. And we were really thinking around it, and one of our editors suggested the words that ended up on the cover, the power within. And to me, we're about this power within. My work is about talking a lot about Ukraine to the audiences outside Ukraine. And everything I've seen, all the people I've met, I never wanted to identify myself with them, like no matter where I stay. I love Italy. The Italians, they are always happy. They know how to live their lives. I don't want to be one of them. I want to be one of them in London or in the United States. Well, because I usually have a feeling that we are stronger, way stronger. And I think now we are the strongest. I have a bias, but I think that we are really the strongest ones in the world. This is what we're about. Ivan? I apologize for some pathos answer about the Ukrainian people. I would like to cite a poem. Ukrainians is the people the strength of whose truth was never conquered. You knock him down, and the strength blossoms again. So that's the strength of Ukrainians to me. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Thank you for this conversation. Today you're seeing strong, unbreakable people full of inspiration. Ivan Liubysh-Kirdei, Mykhailo Tkach, Olha Rudenko. Thank you very much for your attention, and let me remind you that you will be able to watch the awarding to find out who's the laureate. You will be able to do it on the 22nd of May. There will be a broadcast in Suspilne Kultura and the pages of our media. You will be able to watch and comment. Thank you, dear colleagues.